and I blew it. I got so mad. I ended up putting my fist through the cabinet in the kitchen, and just so happened the landlord was showing the house across the street, and they saw me. I was like, oh God, I'm just losing control. She woke up with hallucinations, and she died. She just didn't make it through that. A woman who survived cancer and all kinds of other odds. Drugs brought her down and killed her. And the feelings I had at that point were anger and rage. I hated God. I had thought about killing myself many times, but I was never able to do it.
This is The Bottom Line. I'm Gary Thiemann in Los Angeles. From his first marijuana joint, Rick was forever trying to catch that cloud and stay on it. A cloud without a silver lining.
My name's Rick. I'm an alcoholic. First time I remember ever having a drink, I was about 4 years old. My grandmother's brother back in St. Louis, drank Budweiser, and he liked giving me it. I remember the first time he gave me a drink, I can still taste it. I really can. I always remembered that taste. And the taste of beer to me was it. I loved it from the word go. And I can remember him letting me drink just as much as I wanted. And my mom one time yelling at him, don't let him drink so much. And, beer was a part of my family. My father drank, all my relatives drank, so it wasn't any real big deal to let the little 4-year-old have a drink. I didn't mind. And I do know that we had a lot of family get-togethers, and the beer was always around, and I know I snuck whenever I possibly could. I don't ever remember getting a buzz when I was a kid, but I do remember the taste most of all. Where I grew up, there was a lot of older kids, and they shared. And my first experience with marijuana was by an older friend, and I can remember floating on a cloud. It was great. It was the most wonderful thing in the world. We were out there playing football in a schoolyard, and I was floating. And I proceeded to try to find that feeling again. I had a friend of mine who his older brother would get him some marijuana. And as a kid, I do remember not ever really fitting in. I didn't know why, but I was always doing things off by myself, and put me in a crowd and I'd have to get out. Everybody was looking at me. And when I was 10 or 11 years old, I was molested by a neighborhood kid, this same kid I used to get high with. And I didn't know that there was anything wrong with it. Once I did find out that there was something wrong with it, there was a lot of guilt and shame, and nobody was ever going to find out about it. But unfortunately, my father, he didn't know too much how to talk to me about the birds and the bees, and anything I learned on my own or from other people. So consequently, I did a lot of experimenting. There was at one point that I seduced my little sister and had sex with her. And this stuff did not really bother me at the time, but later on I did start to feel the pressure from it. The next time that I really remember getting drunk was with those guys that I got the first buzz from, and seems to me I ended up passed out somewhere. From the word go, it didn't pay for me to moderate. When I got the beer or whatever, there was only one reason to drink it. and that was to get the effect. That was it. I wanted to get drunk. You see, like I was saying, I didn't really feel right. I didn't feel like I was a part of. Star Trek come around, like, beam me up, Scotty. I'm out of here. It just, something just didn't click, and I started feeling different from everybody. So whenever I had the chance, I wanted out of here, and I got that every time I was able to get a drink, or every time I was able to smoke some dope, or, I got that, and I was good to go. It never made me a ladies' man. It never made me sports star. It never made me anything. It allowed me to feel a little comfortable for a period of time to where I didn't have to feel. And that's what I wanted. I did not want to feel. When I started using some kind of a daily use, I was pushing, I don't know, 13, 14. I can sum it up for you. I was a liar, a cheat, and a thief. And it didn't matter from who. It was either my neighbors, my parents, my sisters. It did not matter. Whatever it took for me to catch a buzz, it was all that mattered. And I ended up in an area. The job of my father changed, and we promptly moved from where I had spent the better part of my life down in Garden Grove. And when he finally moved us up to the beautiful desert, I was resentful. And I proceeded to find the friends who would get me where I wanted to be. I didn't hang around with the preppies. I was never a scholastic giant. I got D's and F's. That's the way it was, and I really didn't care. I graduated from high school, barely. Things just started not to work. I got to the point where I wasn't able to function real well. I had a grandmother die about 6 months before I stopped doing all this stuff, and she died from withdrawals. She was addicted to prescription drugs, and she woke up with hallucinations, and she died. She just didn't make it through that. A woman who survived cancer and all kinds of other odds, and drugs brought her down and killed her. And the feelings I had at that point were anger and rage. I hated God. I had thought about killing myself many times, but I was never able to do it. At this time, the molesting, the bestiality, the thieving, the lying, all this stuff was coming to a head. See, I'd pressed it down for so long I could no longer hold it there. And it was coming up, and it was coming up in fits of anger and rage. And, it all came to the head over a relationship. I almost killed the girl. She just pushed me so far that I don't know what stopped me from really going over the edge, but I thought it would work. I fell in love, and this was it. This girl was the one. And I set up house with her, and we were there about a month, and all of a sudden she's not really that happy, and she ends up leaving, and she goes to New York to work for a month. And this I couldn't understand. See, in my state, I was irate, jealous, and I knew she was doing something. I knew it. You couldn't tell me she wasn't. And the phone calls I would have with her, they were real short. And, I was sitting there at the apartment paying the bills. She was just fooling around. And I confronted her time after time after time. At that point, I kind of thought, well, maybe I have a problem with drinking. So I tried to quit, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't last. It lasted a couple hours. But after talking to her for hours on end, I finally get her to come back home, and she says she wants to try, and she's gonna do this. And at night I'd go to bed, and I'm listening to her talk on the phone, and don't know who she's talking to, old boyfriends or whatever. And we're there, and I thought I was doing better. She had made it think that I was wrong, and a week and a half later, she wants to move out. She's gone. She can't take it. And I blew it. I got so mad. I ended up putting my fist through the cabinet in the kitchen, and just so happened the landlord was showing the house across the street, and they saw me, and it's like, oh God, I'm just losing control. And I got her out of there as quick as I could, and I moved her buddy in so she couldn't come back. And I wanted it to work with her, and I was following her from wherever I could, and it just blew up. One night I confronted her at her house and where she was staying, and she gave me this song and dance, and I proceeded to rearrange her car with my fist, and oh God, I was so mad. I was just out of control. And it wasn't long after that I just could not work anymore. My head just didn't function. I could not concentrate on what was going on. I was heavily into speed and alcohol and marijuana, and I just couldn't think. And I found myself one night in this garage where I worked, and it was a Sunday night, and I was trying to get something done because I knew I was about out of money. I couldn't keep going and keep doing the things I would without money. And I couldn't do it. I just couldn't get anything done. I'd go to do one thing, and I'd lose my train of thought, and I'd try doing another, and I was a great starter, but I couldn't finish. I just couldn't finish. And I was listening to the radio that night, and I was starting to get a little emotional, and I heard a radio program, and it was about this doctor from down in Los Angeles somewhere, and he had a hospital. And, I was sitting there listening to him, and I heard things I was identifying with. I'm like, God, my God, these guys have the feelings I do. How can anybody have the feelings I do? And I listened more, and I was crying, and I just spin in circles, and it just drove me to a point where I just said a prayer, and the prayer was this: God, I can't do it no more. You gotta help me. It was the most honest prayer I'd ever prayed in my life. And the next morning I was going over to my mother's house. I needed to talk to somebody. I bypassed her house because I was afraid to stop. I did a couple of loops around the block, and I pulled in. And I got about 3 feet into the door of her house. I see her come around from the kitchen, and I just broke loose. And I proceeded to tell her how my life was screwed up, and I was doing all these drugs and all this alcohol, and I was just messed up, and just please help me. And she did what she knew how, and she took me to a psychologist, and he got me into a care unit.
The care unit was the first step towards recovery physically. Listening to the radio and hearing a program that talked about issues, actually Rick's issues, was a shock to him. Others felt the same way as he. How could that be? But the door for recovery had just been opened, one day at a time.
I ended up in a care unit due to my mother putting me in touch with a psychologist. And the only thing I really remember about that was the first couple of hours when I was going through the tests, and then they pumped me up full of Valium and proceeded to put me to bed. And every once in a while, late at night, I would come out and get something to eat or something to drink, and that was about all I could do. I found out later on I had a cousin who had come in to see me while I was going through the DTs and the detoxing, and she took one look at me and said that's not my cousin, and she would never come back. I hadn't realized how far down I'd gone. You know, a man 6'6", and I weighed all of about 170 pounds. That's pretty well stick. When I finally came to, and they stopped giving me all that Valium, there was some other people in that care unit, and they came around making sure I was okay, and they were slowly adjusting me to that type of a life. And I started to feel a little bit better. You know, the head cleared a little bit, and they started going to the groups in there, and one group hit on something. One group hit on a guy was sharing about being molested, and it really hit with me because I could identify with it. I knew the feelings, but I had to leave. You know, I got up and I left that room as quick as I could, and I went in the other room and I was just crying. It's like the valve was open and there was no stopping it. And after the session was over, I traced down the counselor and I got him aside, and I told him my deepest, darkest secrets. I told him everything that I thought people would kill me over. And that was the start of my life.
The very people Rick mistrusted turned out to be trusting, reliable people necessary for his recovery, both emotionally and spiritually.
Francis, who was my priest friend, he helped me through a lot. You know, I was scared to death, and you know, at first, her parents did not approve of what was going on, and you know, he talked us both through it. You know, God has been holding my hand my whole life. There's a prayer. It's called Footprints, and I won't tell you what it says because I want you to read it. But that prayer says my life. You know, and God has always had a hold of me in one way or another. And through this courtship, and you know, I was asking Francis, you know, well, I want to marry this girl, and he told me, you know, well, you better do it soon, or he told me that it was okay. And I proposed to my wife on Valentine's Day, and I did it in the most romantic way I knew how, and she said yes. And oh, it was so exciting. You know, that was something I never thought would happen. I never thought that would happen in my life.
You've been listening to The Bottom Line, featuring Rick's story. The Bottom Line features only real stories of recovering alcoholics, addicts, with the sole purpose of planting recovery seeds. Thanks, Rick, for being of service. This show is produced for Armed Forces Radio Worldwide. I'm Gary Thiemann. Until next time, God bless you, and share the message, won't you? This has been a GRT production.
As a family, we give our lives completely. As dedicated servants, we share God's victory to a world that's dying every day. We need to reach them. We need to tell them of a better way. Family, we're all a part of God's family. We're sisters and brothers, caring for each other in a special way. every